Hello, everyone. Today, we live in a fast paced and ever connected world, and yet we find ourselves more isolated than ever before, feeling lonely in a crowd of people. Loneliness became an epidemic in the modern Western world and contributes to the rise of fears, anxiety, and depression, mental issues, especially when we age. This condition of loneliness goes against our very own human nature as social beings, leaving many of us disconnected and unfulfilled. Yet, in the midst of this widespread loneliness, I've encountered someone who seems to effortlessly create genuine connection with others. Freddy Jacquin, the world-renowned hypnotherapist and trainer, has a remarkable ability to make people feel seen, valued, and safe around. His workshops are more than educational workshops. They are also transform. And during these workshops, people connect on a profound level with him and with other participants. In this interview, we'll explore the key elements of how Freddy fosters these authentic connections and how his approach can help us all combat loneliness, build meaningful relationships, and ultimately lead happier and more fulfilled. So, Freddy, thank you for agreeing to record this interview with me. I appreciate it very much. And let's explore with you how you foster those genuine connection and inclusion.
Well, thanks for asking me to join you on this. I'll do my utmost to answer those questions you've been asking.
And I'm happy to discuss this with you because it's a very important topic for me also personally. We spoke before and we identified 5 key elements of how you foster the genuine, authentic connections with people. And the first is feeling good about yourself.
Mm.
How do you help people cultivate this sense of self-worth, especially when they struggle with it?
Well, I think it starts with the understanding that we're good enough. I know we had this conversation about being good enough, but I think so many people strive to be perfect, and I think they have to be perfect in this world to to have any value in themselves. And what I'm saying to my clients, and what I'll say to everyone that's listening, is that you're already a whole being. You know, you're already the most incredible creation. I say it to all of my clients because I absolutely believe it to be true. When you think about how incredible you are as a human being, you know, the things you've been able to achieve, the things you've learned, but we tend to always focus on the things we can't do or the things that we've done wrong. And I think that the two major problems we have as human beings, the first one is expecting too much of ourselves. And then when we don't match up to that expectation, beating ourselves up over it. And we're much harsher on ourselves than we are on our friends or people we love. You know, we allow for our friends to make mistakes. We allow for people who we love to make mistakes. But we're much harsher on ourselves. So I think the number one problem we have as human beings is that we expect too much of ourselves. And the second one, which is a big problem as well, is mind reading.
Mhm.
You know, they'll be thinking this of me. They must be thinking that of me. He'll be thinking this. She'll be thinking that. And when you've seen as many people as I've seen in therapy, you realise that people aren't thinking about you. They're not thinking about anything else.
Mm.
They're in their own problems. But we think, oh, I said that last week, and they must be thinking I'm stupid or whatever. You know, they're not. You know, they might be thinking about it for an hour or maybe 5 minutes, but after that, they're thinking about their own stuff. So I think it's bringing people back, and I've been saying this recently as well, bring it back to the moment because it is all we have. This moment is the now. But most people are either living in the past or they're living in the future. And by that, I mean they're worrying about things they could have done or should have done or would have done if things had been different. Or they're anxious about something that's not happened yet, which is their future. And neither of those things actually exist. So by getting people to come back and reminding themselves that if they're anxious and worried, then they're worrying about the future, and to bring themselves back to this moment. And if they're worrying about the past, to remind themselves that the past is a void, it's a vacuum, stretches back to the Big Bang, it no longer exists. So those two things for starters, knowing that you're already a whole being, you're already the most incredible creation. And when I say it to my clients, I mean it. I absolutely mean it because I see it. I think we are. I think as human beings, we're incredible. So I remind my clients that, and I also in every session I run, it doesn't matter what it's for. I want my client to understand their worth, and I want to understand their value, and I help them to get into that state of unconditional self-love, which we're going to talk about as we go through this kind of chat that we're having. Because I think, why would you quit smoking if you don't love yourself? Why would you bother to look after your body if you don't truly love yourself? And it's not an arrogance, I love myself. It's wanting for yourself what you want for your clients. It's wanting for yourself what you want for your children or your partner or people you love. That's what I'm talking about. And most people, especially in the world we live in, where they come into this world and they train and they want to help people, and somewhere along the line they forget about themselves. They forget about their own worth, their own value, and they stop looking after themselves. I'm saying we should want for ourselves what we want for our clients. So that's my goal with my clients, to get them to understand their worth and their value. And I do that by getting them to bring back to the moment, to have a look around. I ask simple question: who are the most important people in your life? And if someone's got a child, I'll say, well, look at your child, because that is you. We tend to look at our children and we admire them for their strengths and their abilities and their skills and their sense of humor and all those things that our children have, without thinking that that is who you are. That's when I've spoken about you and your children, and I say you don't have to look any further than your girls to recognize your worth and your value and just how incredible you are. And it's the same for all of us. No, so those simple things that I bring my clients to, just bring them back to the now and get them to recognize that.
This living in the moment is another key element for creating the authentic connections. And how do you help clients to practice this living in the moment?
It is something we have
Stay.
to practice. It's not something we do normally or
Mhm.
naturally. But the other thing about, while we're on that subject, it's about being in the moment with your client. Putting aside all of your own concerns. How are you going to pay your mortgage? What your kids are doing? Your relationships. Put all that out of the way.
For a
Because
moment, right?
when you're in that room with that client, or you're in that room with that group of people, it should be, even that for that time you're with them, and I say it, and for me, it's true that that person's all that matters to me. While we're having this conversation today, you're all that matters to me, Olga.
Mhm.
I'm not concerned about anyone listening to this or not listening to it. It's we're having a conversation here, and that's by doing that. I'd like to think I can be authentic in this. I'm not doing this for worrying about what other people are going to think about this conversation. I'm talking to you as someone who's a friend, who admires what you do. And so I'm going to be in a moment with you. So, and I think it's the same when we're in a room with our clients, listening to them, just being in that moment with them, put everything else out of your mind. So I encourage my clients, and I show them ways of doing that. And it is practice, especially because most of us, as I said, we're living in the past or the future. And when we find ourselves feeling anxious or worried, if we have to consciously bring ourselves back to the moment and remind ourselves that whatever it is we're feeling anxious about or worrying about is in this moment, is just our imagination. And to know that we can just change our emotion by imagining the outcome differently. Because in the moment, whatever we're worrying about is not real.
Right. Feeling good about yourself, being in the moment, this already helps to connect with other people. The next element we identified beforehand was seeing good and seeing beauty in the person in front of you. And in our society, we constantly hear, in order to be likable, you have to be confident, you have to have charisma. I mean, otherwise you risk that the other person doesn't like you. Your approach is different. Can you explain this?
I
How
think
you?
I think, when we first start learning about communicating with people, there's a lot of talk about rapport. We've got to create rapport. I think it's the other way around. I think rapport's there to be lost. And I think, again, it all comes down to trusting yourself, trusting that you're okay,
Mhm.
trusting you're a good enough person, and also understanding not everyone's gonna get you. No, you can't I think it was Abraham Lincoln said, "You can please some of the people all of the time, all of the people some of the time, but you
Mhm.
can't please all of the people all of the time." And I think it's a bit like that, but being yourself and just being your above charisma and confidence and love, the most potent magnetic force we have in our energy field is authenticity. And to be authentic, you just have to trust that you're okay and to know that you're not perfect and be willing to show that. Be willing to just make the mistakes and be human,
Mhm.
and people get it. And I think that's my best advice is just be authentic, be yourself. We
Mhm.
see so many people. I train people to be hypnotherapists, and people are talking to you like I'm talking to you now. Then they get in the therapy room and they think they have to speak in a different way. They think, "Oh, I've got to now be the therapist." And you see them, they'll be talking to you like I'm talking to you now, and then they say, "Okay, you're ready to be hypnotized." And then all of a sudden they go, "And now, with your eyes closed, you can begin to relax." I'm sitting there thinking, "Where'd the other person go?" You know, just be yourself. You've been communicating since we first opened our mouths as babies, and yet we think we have to communicate differently. And there is all these things about learning different language patterns and how we use our language. And but for me, language is all we've got as a hypnotherapist. Excuse me. That's all we have as hypnotherapists. So, but I trust that I've been communicating for a long time. And if I'm just, if my heart's in what I'm doing, if my thinking, which is what we're going to get to in a moment, is about wanting the best for my client and believing they have the ability to change, then I think that comes across in what I say and what I do.
And we judge ourselves, but also we judge other people. And you have this remarkable ability to see the good and to see the beauty in the other person, even if they fail to see anything good about themselves. So the clients that come to you, they maybe hate their body and they hate themselves, and you show them how likable they are. So can you speak about that? How you find that positive perspective on
You
any
know,
person?
I have hypnosis, which is a great tool, but I give people an experience. And what I get them to do is I get them to take them to a space where they, if you like, separate from their physical being. I talk about the essence of who we are. And I suppose in some culture they call it the spirit, the soul. I talk about the essence, the that intangible part of our being, the passenger, the observer, the part of us that's watching ourselves behaving, that's observing the thoughts that are coming up. Now that part of us, so to get that part of you separated from you, and then to recognize that part of us is pure energy, is pure intelligence, is pure light, it's pure love. It's not a tangible material thing, but it's the thing that we're born with. I don't do I don't do past life regression, and I rarely do regression, but there are opportunities to take people back because I think it's a beautiful thing to do. Take people back to when they were like 2 months old, when all they wanted to do was to be held and loved and fed and hugged. That's what we're born with, aren't we? We're born, with you're just love, you're just light, you're just joy, you're just like that, pure intelligence that we're born with. But I don't think I know that that is still a core of our being. Is still that just pure energy and light and love. So
Yes.
to get people to get into that space, to experience that feeling, and then to understand that that is who they are, no matter what's going on in their lives, no matter what's happening to their body, the essence of who they are is still that pure energy and light. So I want people to have that experience and then to be able to take that understanding into everything they do. I think I might have said it to you, but I see people with weight loss and people come in and they hate their bodies because they've put on weight or whatever else. And I can look at people and it's true. And I say, and I've said it to some people, I say, I can see what's beautiful about you. And that's not based on how many pounds you weigh. You know, I was speaking to someone, I was running some training in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. And it's this incredible, wonderful therapist. And she's coming up to 80. And she came to see me. She said to me about her age. I think she was just come up for her birthday. And I said, "That's just the age of your body. That's not your age," And you can look at this woman's beautiful blue eyes, and you can see she hasn't aged. She's not aged. Her body's aged, but she hasn't aged. And when we understand that the essence of who we are, so I was talking about a moment ago, that part of us is just pure energy, light, and love. It's ageless. It's infinite. And then when you realize that no matter what happens to our body, it can't touch us. It can't touch the essence of who we are. And by getting people to understand that, yes, for me, this is just transport. What part of my body has to go before Freddy disappears? But I understand that people judge me by my transport. We're pretty fickle as human beings. If I, I think I've said to you, I drive a 25-year-old BMW and I put it on, I don't know if you have it in Holland, but this thing over here called WeBuyAnyCar.com. Probably heard of them.
Mhm.
And you can put your car on and they'll value it for you and they'll buy it off you, right? So they offered me £150 for my car, but £50 to pick it up, right? So it's worth about 100 quid, my car. But I understand that people might, if they don't know me, they might make a judgment on how successful I am based on my car. And it's, people do it. If I was driving in a brand new Tesla, they go, "Oh, he must be really successful."
Yes.
It might be all the money I have in the world, it might be borrowed, that money, but people make a judgment. So I understand that this is just transport, and I understand that people make a judgment on it. And because I present and because I say to people, you can create the life you want, I feel there's a certain kind of duty of mine to be as good as I can be physically. So I can say to people, "You can be as good as you can be physically." I can't be as good as I was when I was 22, but I can be as good as I can be for 72, and that's what I maintain. And I and so and the other thing about that, without this transport, I can't communicate with you. I can't move. I can't experience the pleasures of life without this. But it's not who I am. And I try and get my clients to understand that about themselves. So they're not just basing their worth and their value on their physical being. We live in a world which kind of does that to everybody. But
Yes.
once we get past that, and as you were saying earlier, the big thing, the major thing, once we get past judging others, and once we get past the fear of being judged, that puts you in an awesome space. But that's also the understanding I was talking about earlier about knowing that some people are going to get me, some people are going to understand me, and some people aren't. And I can't chase after those people who don't understand me and try and convince them that I'm okay. I don't have the time.
Yes.
So, it's just these simple understandings really that make a difference.
I recently heard this idea that the beauty and goodness is so abundant in this life that it becomes like a white noise, and that our mind stumbles upon imperfection and we get fixed on that imperfection, that judgment about ourselves or the other persons. And we move beyond that judgment and see the goodness. This helps very much. It's an important element of connection with
Yeah,
others.
I guess the most important thing is to get over the fear of being judged. And and we sit we watch Strictly Come Dancing, or we watch the Olympics, and we're making judgments about people that are incredible. "Oh, she's not very good on that beam." Well, try getting on that beam yourself and doing a double somersault or something. We're sitting there judging them like we could do it. So we do it all the time, but when we get past that judging people. And the other thing is the big fear, the major fear for all of us, until you get over it, is the fear of failure. How many things do people not do or not achieve in their life because they're afraid of failing? So the simple things for me, I don't see change as difficult. I see it as like simple understandings we should have about ourselves and about living a life that serves us. It's not always easy, is it? Because we get into relationships, we get into, different situations. It's not easy just to always just live on your own path and do your own thing. But we can within the situations we build around us be our best self. And that's it. And whatever that is, try and live authentically, try and be kind. I mean, I'm not a religious person at all, but I just try and be as kind as I can be to people and try and be the best man I can be, and then leave it at that. I'm not trying to be perfect, and I'm a million miles from it, trust me. Because I love life. I absolutely love life, and I love all the things that life brings. But, I accept myself. That's another thing, just accepting that you're okay.
And if we move beyond liking people, seeing good and beauty in them, there are two more points: is wishing well to others and setting an intention to help others. So how do you cultivate this genuine desire for the well-being of other people?
I think, if we're doing the work we're doing, then I think it should be the most important thing in your life. And I've some years ago, I used to run, group quit smoking, and I'd see hundreds of people at a time in a room. And one day, I ran a group smoking in a place called Hull in England, and the room held 200 people, could sit 200 people, but 350 people booked. So I had to book the room the next night. So I had to, I had to open up for another night. But one of the ladies who came on the first night who quit smoking brought her husband on the second night. And this guy was a salesman, and he looked like a poor man's Michael Caine. He sat at the back with a white gabardine mac on, big thick black glasses, dyed blonde hair. He wasn't interested at all in the whole thing, but he just sat there. And afterwards, he said to me, "Look," he said, "I've noticed how many people are in the room, and I know how much you're charging. This seems like a really good business." He said, "Look, I'm not interested." This is what he said, honestly. He said, "I'm not interested in helping people. Teach me the words and the music, and I'll go and do this." And his wife said, "You're missing the point." And she was right, because if all you're thinking about is how much money you can earn, then you're not really in the right space. I say to my students when they qualify with me and they get their diploma and they want to be hypnotherapists, and I say, "Look, instead of thinking how much money can you earn, just think how many people can I help? How many people can I help?" Because if you could, and this is something I've been saying quite a while now. Creating the life you want by helping others create the life they want. I think it was Zig Ziglar, this kind of motivational guy from the 1970s or 60s, something like that. He predated Tony Robbins and all those people. and he was one of those very motivational guys. And he said, "If you help enough people get what they want, then you get what you want." But I think that's how we should approach it, thinking, "How can I help this person? How many people can I help?" And so my intention is to help as many people as possible. And well, luckily enough now, in living in a world where we have Zoom, we're not geographically strapped when it comes to doing our therapy. We can work worldwide and there's no limits. I think I've got Zoom 1000. I can get 1,000 people on my Zoom session. I haven't done it yet. It's a goal of mine. But, we can help hundreds of people. But when I teach my students, I say, look, hold this in your heart when you're working with your client, because it's so easy when we first learn these techniques and skills to be in the room thinking about the words and thinking about the techniques and thinking about the protocols. And am I getting it right? Am I getting the words right? Well, I say the most important thing is to hold in your heart this thought: I care about you and I want you to be well. If you think it's legitimate to say it to your client, then say it. But you should be thinking it. You should be having that in your heart. Care about you and want you to be well. I think it's more important than the techniques, because if you're truly holding out in your heart and your mind, that's going to come across. In years gone by, when I've helped people quit smoking, and some of them started smoking 6 months later, and they'll phone me up and they say, "I'm sorry, Freddie, I've started smoking again." They were apologising to me. And they've paid me money to help them stop, and they apologised to me. And the only reason I could think they would be apologising to me is because they knew when they were with me, I absolutely wanted them to be free. And then they either see me again or we have a conversation on the phone and they quit. But, you know, these things are important. And the most important thing when we're working with our clients is is an absolute belief in that person's ability to change. That's the most important thing I could teach anybody. And that's only become clear to me in the last few years. And I've been doing this for 30 years. But that's the thing. To hold in your heart the belief this person can absolutely do this today. They can change. And I hold that so absolutely that it doesn't give my client any space to doubt that they can change. So these things they're not techniques, they're not protocols. These are understandings. I think we spoke the other day. It's a knowing that makes the difference. It's just knowing these simple things. So yeah, that's how I get into that space. I hold it in my heart. It's become instinctive for me now. I don't have to think about it.
Mhm.
When I'm in that room with that person, or I'm in the space with a group of people, or if I'm teaching people or training people, it's the same. And because we have hypnosis, if I'm working with a group and you've been in a group that you've done some training with me, the first thing I do is get them into hypnosis, and I get them to have that experience of communication and connection beyond the physical. To get into that space where you are just the essence of who you are. And the way I describe it is, imagine you've got a room with 20 jars in it, 20 and with airtight jars with airtight lids on. And the air in the jar is separated from the air in the room by the airtight lid. And imagine simultaneously those lids are removed and the air just becomes air. And in those rooms when I run my training, I help people get into that space where they're no longer the physical. They're communicating at that level, connecting at that level. And it's a beautiful space. We can't hold it for very long, but when we get in it, and if we're in a room where we're all working together, we're all training together, to get that communication, that connection is a beautiful space. And I want people to have that experience. So again, it's not none of these things are complex. It's just an understanding and knowing of how we can communicate at a different level.
So we just spoke about these five elements. We broke it down into five elements, like how you create the genuine, authentic connection, how you melt hearts of the most critical people and the most resistant people, and this were feeling good about yourself. accepting that you're good enough. The second was living in the moment, being present in the moment for the other person. So then setting an intention of seeing good, seeing beauty in the other person. The fourth was wishing well to the person. And the fifth, setting the intention of being helpful to the other person. Maybe it's now a good moment to talk about your mantra that you
Yeah.
teach your students.
Well,
And
it might sound strange. I had a dream about Tom Hanks, and in the dream, I was hypnotizing Tom Hanks. And with this induction, I don't think anyone has used, right? Anyway, that was in my dream. So I just on the next day, I just went on Facebook and I said, "Look, I had this dream about Tom Hanks. If anyone wants to learn the protocol, just put Tom Hanks in the comments." But about 400 people put Tom Hanks in the comments, but one person was slightly lazy. They just put capital T Hanks, right? So it's like didn't even put his first name, just put T Hanks, which strangely enough spells thanks.
mm,
I didn't even realize that, right? So anyway, so I thought, well, that's a great thing to call this protocol. So a few a few months before that, I'd been running some training in India, and my son Anthony and I, if we're traveling, we run training all over the world. So if we're going to Brazil, we're going to India, or we're going to France, or wherever it might be, we see who can learn as much of the language before we get there. It's a little it's like unspoken competition we have.
mm,
And anyway, Anthony, who organised this trip to India to do this training, he didn't tell me we were going until later. So he had a head start on learning Hindi.
mhm,
So anyway, I spoke to a friend in America and I said, "Look, Anthony's got his head start on me." And this guy said, "Well, you don't have to learn Hindi." He says, "The majority of people in India speak really good English."
mhm,
So he said, "You don't have to learn Hindi." He said, "But what you do need to learn is the greeting, which is namaste." So I said, "Well, what does it mean?" He said, "It means I recognize the God within you." And I think it's a beautiful kind of greeting. But not being a religious person, I just thought if you change one letter in that, it becomes I recognize the good within you.
mm,
So when we got to India and I was speaking to this group, I said, "Look, before we go and practice with each other, when you sit down with your practice partner, I said, just look them in the eye for a couple of seconds until you recognize the good within them. We all have it. Just got to look." And honestly, this is what happened. People were crying because how often does anyone take the time out to actually look at you and recognize the good within you? So I had this in my mind. I had the Tom Hanks thing in my mind, and I had the thing that I was saying to you earlier about my students. I care about you and I want you to be well. So I put these four things together for this little mantra, which I run for myself. And I'd ask all of you watching this or listening to this to take 2 minutes out in the morning before you start your day, maybe before you get out of bed or when you just get out of bed, and just run these words and aim them at yourself. And it goes like this: I recognize the good within you. Thank you. I care about you and I want you to be well. So just running those words, I'll go over it again, but aim them at yourself. I recognize the good within you. Thank you. I care about you. I want you to be well. And when we run those words at ourselves, because we're normally just beating ourselves up, thinking about all the mistakes we've made, all the things we could have done better. But when we take time out to just say, I recognize the good within you, we all have it. I care about you. I want you to be well. And so, although I ran this as a mantra that we can run on ourselves, if you combine that with some box breathing, so you say those words as you breathe in, hold it, and say the next words. Just in your mind, aim them at yourself. You can change your day, honestly, and if you do it for a week, you'll change your week. But when we're sitting with our clients, we can run that in our mind and aim it at our clients. When we look at our clients, we can think, I recognize the good within you. No, thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. I care about you and I want you to be well. So just by running these things in our minds, we free ourselves, one, from the judgment of others, understanding our own worth and our own value, and offering that to our clients. And not just to our clients, but in everyday life. You know, when you're in the greengrocers and you've got someone who's serving you well or being kind to you or whatever, take the time out to recognize that and to appreciate that. There are so many things in this world that we just flying through, like you were saying. So we're rushing through. We're not even seeing it. We're not seeing the good in others. We're not taking the time out to want the best for others and care about others. Just that thing of being, you know, where's an opportunity to be kind today? Where's an opportunity to make someone feel better about themselves today? Just in everyday life. It doesn't have to be just in the therapy room. And if we start living like it, then it becomes instinctive for us. We don't have to purposely think, right, I've got to think these words. You end up just doing it.
So as you say, setting such intention in the morning, it will change your whole day.
It will. It will change your day for sure.
And will
And the
change
other
your
thing is,
connection.
if you're anxious or worried, bringing yourself back to the moment and reminding yourself that in this moment, in the now, whatever we're worrying about is in the future, and it can only be imagined. And we may as well imagine it differently. If you imagine the best outcome, the worst thing that can happen is we can be disappointed. But how much time do we spend in our life worrying about stuff, being anxious about stuff that never actually happened? So it's just, for me, it's just an understanding, a knowing, if you like, that we can change our lives by the way we think.
Rounding up, you can tell how people can work with you, where they can find the information about working with you.
Well, you can if you wanna do some hypnotherapy training with me, then you can look at our website, which is the jacquinhypnosisacademy.com, and we do all our training live online. We also run live retreats from the JHA, and you can also, if you wanna work with me one-to-one on anything, then you can visit my website, freddyjacquin.com. You can book an appointment if you wanna do that. I'd like you to just start by running that mantra on yourself, and you may not need to come and work with me if you do that. You might find all your problems disappear,
And
and
you
you find
might get addicted to all this goodness in your life and want to have and want more of it.
yeah, I mean, it is one of those things. The more, and I often say it's love is the one commodity you can't give away without getting more back in return. So, once you get into that space, but more than anything else, it's finding that space for yourself and knowing that you are worthy of that unconditional self-love.
Thank you, Freddie, for sharing all these insights in our
Nice.
world where we feel isolated and disconnected. Understanding how you to foster genuine connection is truly invaluable. Thank you for sharing this, and
Thanks for
I'm
asking me.
sure I'm sure that the viewers will benefit greatly from your wisdom.
Thanks very much for asking me.